Hello, everyone. This is Armstrong Williams on the right side.
Armstrong.
Don't curse, speak English.
Armstrong.
Virtuous society.
Armstrong.
I dare you to listen.
Hey, turn it up. Hey.
Armstrong.
Get on the right side.
Armstrong.
Elevate your mind.
Armstrong.
I'm Armstrong Williams on the right side.
Yo, man, it's your boy K.O. And you're tuned into the most conservative of our brothers.
Armstrong.
The Armstrong Williams Show. Please give me a break. Grow up. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armstrong Williams Show. Oh, it's veterans. We're celebrating our veterans. Yes, we are. Patrick O'Donnell, Dog Company, about the Normandy invasion. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Armstrong.
Oh, man, I love war stories. I love Normandy. I've been to France many times. You can't go to France unless you go by and see Normandy and the beaches. It's just amazing. First, tell us about your history and what brought you to write and share this great work with the rest of the world.
For 20 years, I've been gathering the stories of World War II veterans and interviewed about 5,000 World War II veterans. And this is my 8th book. I've written 6 on World War II, but this is a very special story in many ways. I got to know the men of Dog Company about 15 or 16 years ago, and I've had an opportunity to finally tell their story as sort of a band of brothers, if you will.
And talk about that band of brothers, because when you say brothers, you're literally speaking, not figuratively speaking. They really became brothers.
What these men went through welded them into a brotherhood. That it's sad. There were 68 men in Dog Company, and then if you add in replacements, there were many, many more. But right now, there's only about 5 left that are still alive. But these men have had lifelong friendships since the war and what they went through. They had some of the most intense training of any Allied unit. For 6 months, they scaled 100 to 300 foot cliffs in England with just their bare hands, and they were going up in full equipment with their M1 grenades, the whole 9 yards, with no safety harnesses. And then their officers would fire over their heads, basically, to give it a feel for combat. But they had to train. They trained relentlessly, and that brought them together. And then combat really, really brought them together to make them a band of brothers. And this book is about roughly 10 or 12 of these men in their own words, a lot of dialogue, very cinematic of what they went through from D-Day all the way through the war.
Talk about war different from the way it's portrayed on TV and when people learn about it in the classroom.
Well, it's very hard to describe war to somebody that hasn't been there. I've been through war. I was in the Battle of Fallujah with the Marine Corps Rifle Platoon, and this book tries to capture the sights, sounds, and smells of war as well as the hidden war, the feelings and emotions that these guys have gone through. That's I think the essence of the book. It's sort of not just a war story, if you will. It's about war and its after effects and how it affects people, as well as what these men, rather heroically were able to accomplish.
Talk about some of their stories and who they were before going to war, what they became after. What was it that happened? What happens in war that changes and leaves such an indelible mark?
War impacts people differently, in each person differently. For instance, the lead character of this book, Leonard Lamel, the Dog Company was about. It was interesting. They really had a sense of competition. They were about winning. They really trained. Everything that they did in the training was about beating out the other companies within the battalion, and they were very successful at that. And it was about sort of carrying out the mission. And for instance, Lamel was able to do something that 1,000 bombers wasn't able to accomplish in 1,000 men. one man was able to take out 5 guns that basically threatened the entire invasion. Stephen Ambrose said that this single person, other than General Eisenhower, was one of the most important people on D-Day. And after the war, he became a very successful lawyer. However, let me contrast that with a radio operator in the unit. And war had a very different impact on him. It never left him, and it haunted him. And it reminds me of some of the men that I served with in Fallujah. And the day that Ronald Reagan gave one of his most famous speeches, the boys of Pointe du Hoc, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day in 1984 on those windswept cliffs, Bob Fruehling ended his life because of war and its impact. So everybody the book captures sort of the different points of view that men have as they go through war and when they come home.
You know what? Talk about the support system that they had during the time and how much war and technology has really changed.
The support system in what sense? The logistics, or what do you mean by that?
The logistics, the air raids, the intelligence on the ground, the kind of equipment that they use in terms of their aircraft and the vehicles?
Well, I think that things have vastly changed. During World War II, these men were, in many ways, very under-equipped. And intelligence was often very faulty. I mean, that's something that still hasn't changed in war. For instance, in the Battle of Fallujah, the intelligence was awful. There was predictions that there were all kinds of civilians in the city when in reality there wasn't, which caused the rules of engagement to change, etc. So I think that there's a lot of sameness in some ways, and then there's a lot of differences. I think today's forces are obviously much more well equipped, and that the intelligence, for the most part, is way more integrated and generally much better. So I think there's quite a few changes and differences, and then there's some sameness as well.
Talk about in terms of the kind of discipline, the kind of preparation, and just the instinct, the bond of trust. And they did not have to deal with the kind of issues then that they would deal with today, but how their intellect and their senses were so keen, and their survival had more to do with common sense and their preparation than anything else.
I think one of the stories that just sort of tells it all is a story of Bob Edlin, who, after D-Day, there was another gun battery called the Graf Spee battery. And the Graf Spee battery was very much like the guns of Navarone. But picture a farmer's field with only a little tiny, small little cupola sticking out, but a fortress that was buried 4 stories under the ground. And the Rangers were given another impossible mission, much like Pointe du Hoc. They had to take out that gun position. For 3 weeks, they spent battling around the Locust Battery, which was ringed with tens of thousands of mines, barbed wire, machine gun nests, anti-aircraft guns, you name it. And they battled for 3 weeks trying to find this thing. And a single individual found an opening on a well-worn path, an opening in the minefield. And he and 3 other men, they were kind of called the Fabulous Four, went down that path. They stormed their way through a small bunker, took a German lieutenant inside the bunker prisoner, who happened to be educated in the United States and speak English. And Robert Edlin said, "Take me to your commander." And the Locust Battery had 800 German soldiers under that commander's control, along with these battleship-sized guns that could pretty much reach anywhere around the fortress city of Brest. And they descended into this cavern-like fortress. They went down an elevator, and he popped into the commanding officer's office, And immediately the officer looked at him and said, you're my prisoner because you're only 4 men. I have 800. And Edlin said, I want you to surrender. And he just looked at him like he was nuts. And at that point, he pulled out a grenade and put it between the officer's legs and compelled the commander to surrender. He went on the loudspeaker, and they surrendered 800 men that day. That's kind of an example of just sort of the balls, if you will, and the courage, the raw courage that some of these guys had.
Patrick O'Donnell, we've got to talk about your father. You know that, right? Patrick. Talk about your father and his military service during World War II.
Well, my dad didn't serve during World War II. He served during Vietnam.
During Vietnam, yes.
It was not a. My dad was on a ship, and it was largely a non-event. It was before Vietnam really started to kick off. He was just in the Gulf of Tonkin and saw some of the early things that went on there. And just like many other veterans, hung up his uniform and went to work.
What about the primary mission of the 5th Rangers Battalion, which was to support the 2nd Rangers and attack on the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc?
You mean the 5th Rangers supported the 2nd was the one they went.
I want to come back to this, but I don't want the music to overdrown what you're saying because it's important. We're going to come back. Patrick O'Donnell's, I guess I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away.
For more information on the Armstrong Williams Show, please visit our new website at www.rightsidewire.com. There you can find his syndicated column archive, view live streams, and get your favorite conservative pundits' views on the current issues affecting the American people. From building wealth to foreign policy, stay connected with Armstrong Williams and his colleagues at the all-new www.rightsidewire.com.
High Point University has experienced unprecedented growth during the worst economic disruption in decades. This growth is driven by a university that focuses on holistic education, on experiential learning, and on values-based living. At High Point University, every student receives an extraordinary education in an inspiring environment with caring people. See what makes High Point University extraordinary at highpoint.edu.
Anderson Brothers Bank, a family-owned and operated establishment that blends traditional personal service, local market awareness, and advanced technology to meet the financial needs of its customers. Visit abbank.com or call 843-464-6271 to see how they can assist you with your banking needs. Anderson Brothers Bank, celebrating 75 years of community banking, the way it should be. Stability right in your backyard since 1933. Join the millions of Americans who pursue one of our country's finest traditions, from hunting to sport shooting. Since 1871, the NRA has grown as a service organization involved in all aspects of shooting sports and is a proud defender of the Bill of Rights. Join today to begin taking advantage of exclusive membership offers and discounts, including up to $25,000 in insurance coverage. Contact the NRA today. Call 1-800-672-3888 or visit nra.org.
Life is full of unexpected changes. Everyone has potential to do wrong. And when they choose to do it, contact the Bucksell Group for your private investigation needs. TheBucksellGroup.com or by phone at 202-243-9746. Whether there's an instance of a cheating spouse, child custody, process service, or security, don't continue suspecting. Get closure so that you can move on with your life. Visit TheBucksellGroup.com now or call 202-243-9746. If you think it's happening, it probably is.
Where heads of state, sports, entertainment, and political celebrities meet. You're listening to Armstrong Williams.
And welcome back. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking to you. Please continue about the battalion, the Ranger Battalion.
Sure. The 2nd Ranger Battalion hit the cliffs. That includes Dog Company. But there were 1,000 men allocated to Pointe-du-Hoc, to taking out these big guns, which threatened the entire invasion. Very strange, auspicious chain of events occurred, though, on the morning of D-Day, that literally changed the course of the invasion. And some people say it might have been the hand of God or fate or whatever you want to say. But a lot of really weird things happened that changed the course of the invasion. That morning, a young naval lieutenant with the Royal Navy that was guiding the attack force into Pointe-du-Hoc, which included the 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalion, his radar was inoperable, and they took the men to the wrong objective, which was a place called Pointe de la Prairie, which was on the other side of Omaha Beach. And they realized that it was the wrong place, sort of as they were approaching these cliffs. And they ordered this young lieutenant to turn the crafts around and go the other way. But what happened was it upset the entire timetable, because at that point, when they were supposed to land at approximately 6:30 a.m., about 300 Allied bombers were plastering Pointe-du-Hoc. If they would have landed at exactly the time that they were supposed to, at 6:30, they would have all probably been dead by our own bombs. That was one. That saved their lives. Two, the secondary group that was supposed to follow up with the 2nd Ranger Battalion was known as the 5th Rangers. And their secondary objective was Omaha Beach, if they didn't get word that they were to come to Pointe-du-Hoc. And what happened next is, as they went towards Pointe-du-Hoc, they started to signal the 5th Rangers about what was going on. But every single radio in the 2nd Ranger Battalion didn't work. They were not able to signal the 5th Ranger Battalion to come to Pointe-du-Hoc. Since they didn't receive this signal, they went to their secondary objective, which was Omaha Beach.
Wow.
And at that time, Omaha Beach was almost being overrun by the Germans. What happened is, one battalion of Rangers came ashore at exactly the right place at the right time, and they helped lead the breakout from Omaha Beach. If that auspicious chain of events didn't take place, Omaha Beach might have been shut down, and it might have changed the course of the entire war.
And also, don't forget about the role that about the story about Seawall Beach.
That's what I was talking about. That's what we're talking about, is Omaha Beach and how the 5th came ashore along the seawall, which is near Omaha Beach, and they broke out of the beachhead from there.
And talk about how that inspired them during that time, because obviously war, we only talk about the moments that are heroic and valiant, but we don't talk about those moments in the bitter cold, the winter, where it seems as though nothing is going right, which you did so well in your book.
That's something that happened a lot with these guys.
Yes.
An example of that is a place called the Hurtgen Forest, which is a battle that not really many people talk about, because in many ways it was a loss for the U.S. Army. We spent 6 months in a place called the Hurtgen Forest, which was on the German border near Aachen. And this forest was a battle that never needed to take place. The Germans had basically fortified it with hundreds of thousands of mines. There were bunkers that had crossfires, so that people, as soon as they moved, they were going to get hit. Everything was zeroed in with mortars and artillery. And in we went to this thing, and it was a giant meat grinder for 6 months. There were 50,000 men that were lost here, almost the same amount of people that we lost in Korea. And into this thing, the Rangers were thrust, and they lived a dog's life. They were in foxholes for weeks at a time, where it just rained, and you're in a rainy foxhole with water, and everything is a miserable existence. Food's bad, and then you're being shelled constantly. There's German patrols. There's mines everywhere. I mean, you step in the wrong place and you're going to lose your leg, and that's what happened to a lot of these guys. And then they were the only unit at the time that was in reserve. They had used so many men in this battle that some of the entire divisions, they were just shells of their former selves. They were reduced in half or almost to two-thirds of the men that they started out with. And there was an objective place called Bergstein and a very big hill behind it called Hill 400, which was one of the most important hills in Germany because it hid one of the greatest secrets of World War II, which was Hitler's plans to launch the Battle of the Bulge. And if they were able to take the top of that hill, they could see into the assembly areas where Hitler was putting like artillery and men and tanks in preparation of the Battle of the Bulge, which was going to take place on December 16th. And they launched this attack on December 6th. And almost an entire tank regiment was destroyed trying to take the town of Bergstein. And they committed the Rangers to somehow seize the town and the hill. And in the morning of December 7th, that's exactly what they did. They went through the town, they took it, and then they got up to this sunken road, and they had almost a football field-sized field that they had to cross to get to the hill. And there were literally 10 or 12 machine guns on the other side of the football field. And if you picture the sort of the end zone at the base of this hill, along with bunkers and everything else, and the Germans were throwing all kinds of artillery on these guys, and they led. It's an incredible story. They did a bayonet charge across the field, one of the few times in the European theater, and they crossed that icy field, and they descended on the Germans. They took out those machine gun nests and stormed the hill. And then for 2 days, they defended this hill against all odds. And one of the great stories of the book is how they're getting counterattacked by hundreds of Germans. And one of the men, this guy named Ed Secor, there were several German bodies in front of him, and they ran out of ammunition. And he picked up 2 German machine pistols, and with a machine pistol in either arm, he sprayed the Germans as they came up the hill and stopped the counterattack.
That's heart-wrenching, isn't it?
Pretty amazing stuff.
You know, what about, finally, because how can people go out and get a copy of your book? And also, when you tell us that, just talk about how we can do a better job at helping our veterans and soldiers readjust to life.
Well, that's a really big issue, Armstrong. And I've seen it personally myself with the platoon that I was in. We've had 2 guys commit suicide as they've not been able to adjust to life at home. There's a lot of men that have PTSD. It's a big issue. We need to do more for our veterans, you know, in terms of economically with jobs, etc., and then just helping people readjust. They're coming home from a situation where it's high-intensity conflict or just being on edge, you know, worrying about IEDs and etc., to coming home to normalcy. And we definitely need to do something about that. And in terms of the book, you can get that on Amazon.com. It's a great place to go. You can see the reviews up there, as well as a lot of pictures and photos. And it's featured in the front of the store at Barnes & Noble and the tables you come in, and all kinds of other bookstores around the country.
So how do we help them readjust? How do we give them better benefits? How does the Veterans Administration really work to empower them?
That's it's a very good question, and I'm not so sure I have all the answers, but it's very similar to being it's like coming home from World War II for some of these guys, but instead of the late 1940s or 50s where America was booming, we're in a situation where it's almost like the Great Depression for some men, where they're not able to find work, and it compresses the problems. It compresses all these problems and makes it even worse.
But some adjust better than others. Why?
Hard to say. I mean, the human mind and the human condition is, everybody has a different reaction to war. Some people take what they saw and did there, and they build upon it. They take the positive and they throw out the negative, and then there are others that never recover. I mean, it just depends on who you are.
Do they ever really adjust, Patrick? Or they just learn to navigate it better?
Hard to say. I mean, I think that the reality is that you never forget, and that's something that's seared in your mind for the rest of your life. And it's, on today, for instance, is Veterans Day, and that's a bittersweet day for anybody that's been in combat, because it's certainly you remember the men that never returned home.
And it's a very emotional day for them also, isn't it? What can we do better as human beings when we see veterans? How should we acknowledge them? Because sometimes we just ignore them and we forget and don't remind them that we appreciate their sacrifice.
I think that people thanking them for their service, and what I mean by that is that includes the men that never receive, I don't think they're due. The World War II guys get it. If they wear their World War II hat or whatever, people come up to them and say thanks. The guys in Iraq and Afghanistan, they don't receive it, and they deserve it, because in many ways they've gone through wars that are not popular necessarily, and they served time and time again. I mean, the men in the platoon that I was with, they've gone back to Iraq and Afghanistan sometimes 6, 7 times, even more.
Listen, Patrick O'Donnell, thank you so much for joining us, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, Pearl Harbor, a world at war, December 1941, Stanley Wein Traub. Don't go away.
For more information on the Armstrong-Williams Show, please visit our new website at www.rightsidewire.com. There you can find his syndicated column archive, view live streams, and get your favorite conservative pundits' views on the current issues affecting the American people. From building wealth to foreign policy, stay connected with Armstrong-Williams and his colleagues at the all-new www.rightsidewire.com.
America must change course if we hope to survive and save the American dream for our children and grandchildren. How do we fix Social Security and Medicare? How do we cut government spending? How do we reform health care? How do we simplify the tax code? The Heritage Foundation has a bold plan that tackles these tough problems using common sense solutions that leave partisan politics on the sidelines. Find out how we can save the American dream at savingthedream.org, paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Hi, this is Armstrong Williams with an opportunity to own a piece of paradise in Nassau, Bahamas. Spectacular land prices, 8,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet lot, affordable prices, hilltop properties with views of the magnificent sea. Just call 242-677-3120 or 3121 or go to info@rightsidewire.com and leave your information.
Does your school, team, church, or charity need a new fundraiser? Do you need to work out of your home or part-time? Are you a small business that can use an additional revenue stream? Then you need Yellow Llama. Do you need affordable web services or tools to enhance your existing business? Are you a graphic artist who wants to create a revenue stream with your art but not get ripped off? Then go to www.yellowllama.com.
Join the millions of Americans who pursue one of our country's finest traditions, from hunting to sport shooting. Since 1871, the NRA has grown as a service organization involved in all aspects of shooting sports and is a proud defender of the Bill of Rights. Join today to begin taking advantage of exclusive membership offers and discounts, including up to $25,000 in insurance coverage. Contact the NRA today. Call 1-800-672-3888 or visit nra.org.
Where heads of state, sports, entertainment, and political celebrities meet. You're listening to Armstrong Williams.
Stanley Wein Traub, good morning and welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Pearl Harbor, Christmas. Why Christmas?
Why Christmas?
Of course I know the answer, but I'm not assuming that our young people have studied and understand our history. Talk about Pearl Harbor in that day and how it's still etched in the minds of many Americans and around the world, and how much of the debris still remains underwater, and how much it changed America and what America was like before.
There are a lot of questions. December the 7th is Pearl Harbor Day. It will always be Pearl Harbor Day. I don't think we'll ever move that date around the way November 11th has been moved around. That was Armistice Day for World War I. And then we began to forget about World War I and moved some other events into that date, and it became Veterans Day. Pearl Harbor, I think, will always remain what it is. And we use it as a metaphor. For example, the 11th of September, in 2001, the attack on the World Trade Center was a second Pearl Harbor, and it's become a metaphor. It's become a metaphor for awakening us to a threat that we hadn't realized was so close to us, and changing our minds and bringing us into a wartime footing. There's been no other event like it. It was the worst military disaster in American history. We lost over 4,000 men at Pearl Harbor. There are still 2 ships in the harbor at Pearl Harbor that are visited by thousands of tourists, if you want to call them tourists, mainly the Arizona Memorial. More than 1,000 sailors were buried when the Arizona exploded after a torpedo hit it. The battleship Utah is also there, but very few people know about the Utah. So 2 of our battleships are still in the harbor as memorials. They have not been moved. We couldn't move them. Pearl Harbor awakened the United States to war. There had been many attempts to acquaint the American public with the threat of Japan and the threat of Germany. We were still an isolationist country in 1941, not thinking that we could be attacked. After all, we had 2 oceans between us and Japan and Germany. Even Pearl Harbor was thought to be an impregnable base, thousands of miles away from Japan. It was impossible for it to be attacked, and yet we were asleep. Pearl Harbor changed us from an isolationist country to a wartime mood, and it changed the way President Roosevelt was able to handle world affairs. He had worried not about Japan, but had worried about Germany, because Germany had swallowed up almost all of Europe in 1940 and 1941. The British were embattled and alone. He wondered how we could help the British, and he helped the British just short of war. In fact, he thought that maybe he could trigger a war with Germany and help the British that way by sending out destroyers to convoy ships across the Atlantic. The Germans actually torpedoed several of our destroyers in late 1941, but Congress was still so isolationist, so unwilling to provide funds for defense after a long depression, that this was not enough provocation. I don't think Roosevelt expected the war to begin in the Pacific, rather in the North Atlantic. It didn't happen that way. But we broke the Japanese diplomatic code, not the military code, the Japanese diplomatic code, in November 1941. And reading it, we realized, the Navy and the Army realized that the Japanese were going to break diplomatic relations with us. That suggested war. We didn't break the military code until after the war began. And this has caused some confusion among people, especially conspiracy theorists, who like to think it went the other way. But it was clear enough that the Japanese were heading toward war with us, that on November 27th, remember December 7th is pretty close to November 27th.
Yes.
On November 27th, General Marshall, the Chief of Staff of the Army, sent cables to all of our bases in the Pacific, from the Canal Zone to Manila in the Philippines, which said, this is a war warning. The Japanese are likely to attack us at any time. Be on the alert. Well, that did no good at all. Nobody was on the alert. We were so little on the alert that on the morning of Pearl Harbor, the morning of December the 7th, the heads of the Navy and the Army were due to play a game of golf at 8 o'clock that Sunday morning. 5 minutes before that, the Japanese came in and attacked us. They were appalled and shocked. They weren't ready. They didn't have reconnaissance up in the air. They had shut down their primitive radar, and we knew very little about the approach of the Japanese. Fortunately, one soldier, Joseph Lockhart, asked if he could continue training on the radar, despite the fact that it was supposed to be shut down. And he saw blips on his primitive radar screen that looked like incoming planes. He radioed Fort Shafter on Oahu that it looked like we were having planes approach us that were hostile. And he was told, "Oh, don't worry about that. We have some B-17 Flying Fortresses coming in from California, and probably that's what you see." Well, the two flights actually met in the air. The B-17s, in some cases, were shot down by the incoming Japanese. We were that unprepared.
Do you really think they were that unprepared? Because there are rumors that a legend that has it that we were aware and we wanted this to happen to get us in the war. I mean, what are your thoughts on that speculation?
Well, as I said, these are conspiracy theories. We love conspiracy theories. We have conspiracy theories about the assassination of John Kennedy, for example, that won't go away. And we'll continue to have conspiracy theories about 9/11, the attack on the World Trade Center buildings. This is nothing new, but we did not know the Japanese were coming. We did not break the military code until later. When we finally broke the military code, it enabled us to be ready at the Battle of Midway. And so 6 months later, 6 months after Pearl Harbor, we were able to anticipate the Japanese at Midway and pretty much destroy any attempt they had for invading Hawaii and for winning the war. That lost the war for them. But we did not know ahead of time. We should have known. In fact, there were spies in Hawaii. The FBI knew about spies in Hawaii that were actually charting the berths of various ships in Pearl Harbor and calling back to Tokyo about it. But the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover did nothing about it. And we also had rumors from Japan. It was reported by our ambassador in Japan, Joseph Grew, early in 1941, that he had been at a cocktail party in Tokyo, and I think it was the Embassy of Peru holding the party, and somebody there mentioned the fact that the Japanese were preparing to attack Pearl Harbor, and this came through the Peruvian embassy, and as a result, it was considered to be pretty silly. After all, Pearl Harbor was thousands of miles away from Japan. There'd be no way they could cross the Pacific undetected. And so the rumor, which turned out to be true, was just forgotten. Intelligence failures are very common, and this was a gross intelligence failure, and besides that, it was a gross error in judgment on the part of all the Pacific commanders. General MacArthur, for example, who was commander in the Philippines, got the same message that this is a war warning. He was asleep in his bed. Our bombers were attacked on the ground, and half of our bomber fleet in the Philippines was destroyed that day.
This is just amazing. I know we're coming up on a break because, people laughed at the rumors about 9/11 and there's no way they could hijack our airplanes. I just wonder, what does it say about the
interested in developing conspiracy theories after the fact, and we're always lacking in alertness. The same thing occurred in the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, where we did not think that the Germans had the ability to attack us, and we were asleep. And this was just before Christmas in 1944. It seems that this is holidays, and especially Sundays, are a good time for enemy attacks. And even the attack on Russia by Germany on June 22nd, 1941, was an attack on a Sunday. Stalin had been alerted many times.
Hold there for us. Pearl Harbor, Christmas, A World at War, December 1941, Stanley Wein Traub, erudite, sweeping, and contemplative, classic Wein Traub. Kirkus Reviews. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back.
For more information on the Armstrong Williams Show, please visit our new website at www.rightsidewire.com. There you can find his syndicated column archive, view live streams, and get your favorite conservative pundits' views on the current issues affecting the American people. From building wealth to foreign policy, stay connected with Armstrong Williams and his colleagues at the all-new www.rightsidewire.com.
Anderson Brothers Bank, a family-owned and operated establishment that blends traditional personal service, local market awareness, and advanced technology to meet the financial needs of its customers. Visit abbank.com or call 843-464-6271 to see how they can assist you with your banking needs. Anderson Brothers Bank, celebrating 75 years of community banking, the way it should be. Stability right in your backyard since 1933.
High Point University has experienced unprecedented growth during the worst economic disruption in decades. This growth is driven by a university that focuses on holistic education, on experiential learning, and on values-based living. At High Point University, every student receives an extraordinary education in an inspiring environment with caring people. See what makes High Point University extraordinary at highpoint.edu.
Whether it's their impact on prison guards, law enforcement officials, business executives, employees, or marriage and relationships, Lorette is dedicated to changing the individual and institutions around the globe. Lorette's diverse network and training courses can help provide you with the tools you need to both wisely and confidently lead, manage, and supervise yourself as well as others. Lorette Business Network, a proven system for achieving success in your business and life. Please visit their website and begin this life-lasting journey with Lorette today. www.lorette.org.
To travelers along the road of life who have fallen asleep at the wheel, to the many who woke up in time to avert disaster and get back on the righteous path. For the ones who crashed and survived and now adhere vigilantly to a virtuous and righteous path. Finally, Armstrong Williams' much-anticipated new book, Reawakening Virtues, gives his insights into these daily challenges and much more. Reawakening Virtues is available in bookstores and at Amazon.com.
Where heads of state, sports, entertainment, and political celebrities meet. You're listening to Armstrong Williams.
Stanley Wein Traub is a National Book Award finalist, Professor Emeritus of Arts and Humanities at Penn State University, and the award-winning author of more than 50 highly acclaimed books, including Silent Night and 11 Days in November. He lives in Delaware. Listen, talk about how this changed the world, introduced the nuclear arms race, the age of the atomic weapon, and what lessons not only did America learn from this, but how this brought about the ending of World War II. While we talk about the casualties and the loss of life, can we say that as a result of this devastating attack on America, that many more lives would have been lost and had this not happened? How do you reconcile this, Mr. Wein Traub?
If Pearl Harbor hadn't happened, undoubtedly we would have been forced into the war some other way, and possibly with Germany rather than Japan. And this was the main reason that as soon as Pearl Harbor occurred, Winston Churchill, then Prime Minister in England, invited himself to the White House. He wanted to talk to President Roosevelt about a Germany First campaign. The American people, after all, were outraged by the Japanese sneak attack, and they wanted to go after Japan. Realistically, Churchill knew that our Pacific fleet was decimated. We couldn't go after Japan right away, but we could do something about Germany, and with Britain alone, he needed all the help he could get. And he invited himself to Washington. He arranged to go on a battleship across the stormy North Atlantic. It took him about a week to cross the Atlantic. It was very, very bad weather. He finally got to Virginia, and a plane was sent for him to go from there to Washington. And just a couple of days before Christmas, he was a guest in the White House. And he was like the man who came to dinner. He was there, and it didn't look like he'd ever go away. He had a wonderful time in Washington. He spoke to Congress, told Congress that if his mother had been English and his father American rather than the other way around, he might have gotten to Congress on his own. They loved him. He and Roosevelt spoke from the White House portico to light the Christmas tree at the White House on Christmas Eve. Churchill, who was not a churchgoer, nevertheless was taken in by Roosevelt to a church for Christmas Day, and he asked Roosevelt, "Why a Methodist church? Don't you go to an Episcopal church?" And Roosevelt said, "Yes, but I like to sing with the Methodies." And so Churchill learned about what a Methodist observance was like. He remained until after New Year's, and on New Year's Day, Roosevelt took him to an Episcopal church in Alexandria, Virginia. And so for the first time in his life, within a space of about 10 days, Churchill had gone to church twice.
That's a riveting story. Talk to us. I mean, I'm interested in your book when you talk about the commandos officers, Mad Jack Churchill and the 35 in no relation to the Prime Minister. Talk about this guy, Mad Jack, who was born in Hong Kong and was between the war soldiers reactivated in 1939.
I try to talk in Pearl Harbor Christmas about what was going on around the world, not merely in the United States and not merely in Washington, D.C. And Mad Jack Churchill was involved in a commando raid on a port in Norway. They were trying to not only alert the Germans to the fact that the British weren't out of the war, they were still able to attack, but to try to spread German troops around so that they would delay a possible invasion of Britain itself. And Jack Churchill was involved in that commando raid. There were other commando raids during that period, and other events that occurred then showed how broad the war had become. We had been in the Philippines since 1898, but since MacArthur was asleep at the switch, on Christmas Eve, he had to flee Manila, although he lied about it, and went to Corregidor Island in Manila Bay, where he was holed up for a couple of months before he could escape to Australia. We had Wake Island attacked in the Central Pacific, and for the only time in the entire war, coastal batteries actually sank invading ships. The Marines were heroic in their defense of Wake Island, but eventually those who survived the attack were captured and spent the rest of the war in a Japanese prison camp. That gave rise to a very famous quotation, which is not true. The newspapers reported that Major James Devereux, commanding the Marines there, had sent a cable to Hawaii, send us more Japs, which sounded pretty feisty. It was a twisted cable. It never was said that way, but we were looking for heroes, and they, of course, became great heroes. We had another hero who really wasn't one at that time, Colin Kelly, the pilot of V-17 in the Philippines, was credited with sinking a Japanese battleship off the Philippines and losing his life when his plane went down. It turned out that the battleship Haruna was in Kure Harbor in Japan and was still there at the end of the war. It had never been sunk. But we were looking for heroes everywhere. And some heroes were very strange, unusual heroes. For example, there was an American lady in Paris who ran the Shakespeare bookshop, was approached by a German officer who said that he wanted to buy a copy of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake that was in the window. She wouldn't sell it to him, and he vowed he would get it, and he'd come back. When he came back, he found that the shop had been closed and boarded up, the sign taken down, and all the books gone. The lady had gone into hiding, and that was the end of his getting a Christmas present for somebody. Hitler, at the time, was enthused about the attack of the Japanese. He said the Japanese have never lost a war. Now we're certain to win. But he was having a rough time in Russia. The snows had fallen. He was unable to capture Moscow. And the winter had come. And he went on the air, on the radio, that is, he and his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, pleading for winter clothes for his troops in Russia, asking for donations and saying they needed them for Christmas presents for the troops. He had outlawed Christmas. Suddenly he brought Christmas back into the picture because they needed the supplies. They really never got to Russia. Tens of thousands of garments were collected, but they never got there. He went back on the radio on New Year's Day with a statement that he looked for God's help to win the war in 1942. He had outlawed God in Germany, and suddenly he had to bring God back in the picture because things were getting bad. It was a strange period in our history.
You know, you've got to tell us how we can go out and get a copy of this book, and do you think anything like this can ever happen again in our history?
I think it can happen again. After all, it did happen in the Battle of the Bulge, where Eisenhower was unaware of the Germans massing to attack. It happened again with the World Trade Center, where we had intimations of trouble, but they were ignored. I think complacency is just a part of our psyche, and what we don't want to believe, we don't believe. And this happens all the time. I assume it will happen again, although we have all kinds of ways now that we didn't have before to anticipate events. We have electronic means of eavesdropping that we didn't have before. We have stealth planes that can fly that are not even piloted, that can travel over territory that is not our own. There are all kinds of ways that we should be able to find out threats in advance, but we don't. And when we do, we don't believe them. This is just part of our psyche. We don't believe bad news until it happens.
Listen, I cannot tell you the respect, the appreciation, the admiration that I have for you as a person, as a writer, and also you always have values and morality always in your writings, because obviously it's something that's very important to you and is always present in your writings, and I thank you for that foundation. And all the best, and we look forward to having you back again.
I hope to be back. Thank
Stanley Wein Traub, Pearl Harbor, Christmas, or World at War, December 1941. It's a must read. A must read. Thank you.
High Point University has experienced unprecedented growth during the worst economic disruption in decades. This growth is driven by a university that focuses on holistic education, on experiential learning, and on values-based living. At High Point University, every student receives an extraordinary education in an inspiring environment with caring people. See what makes High Point University extraordinary at highpoint.edu.
Join the millions of Americans who pursue one of our country's finest traditions, from hunting to sport shooting. Since 1871, the NRA has grown as a service organization involved in all aspects of shooting sports and is a proud defender of the Bill of Rights. Join today to begin taking advantage of exclusive membership offers and discounts, including up to $25,000 in insurance coverage. Contact the NRA today. Call 1-800-672-3888 or visit nra.org. Anderson Brothers Bank, a family-owned and operated establishment that blends traditional personal service, local market awareness, and advanced technology to meet the financial needs of its customers. Visit abbank.com or call 843-464-6271 to see how they can assist you with your banking needs. Anderson Brothers Bank, celebrating 75 years of community banking, the way it should be. Stability right in your backyard since 1933.
Life is full of unexpected changes. Everyone has potential to do wrong. And when they choose to do it, contact the Bucksell Group for your private investigation needs. TheBucksellGroup.com or by phone at 202-243-9746. Whether there's an instance of a cheating spouse, child custody, process service, or security, don't continue suspecting. Get closure so that you can move on with your life. Visit TheBucksellGroup.com now or call 202-243-9746. If you think it's happening, it probably is.
America must change course if we hope to survive and save the American dream for our children and grandchildren. How do we fix Social Security and Medicare? How do we cut government spending? How do we reform health care? How do we simplify the tax code? The Heritage Foundation has a bold plan that tackles these tough problems using common sense solutions that leave partisan politics on the sidelines. Find out how we can save the American dream at savingthedream.org, paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Does your school, team, church, or charity need a new fundraiser? Do you need to work out of your home or part-time? Are you a small business that can use an additional revenue stream? Then you need Yellow Llama. Do you need affordable web services or tools to enhance your existing business? Are you a graphic artist who wants to create a revenue stream with your art but not get ripped off? Then go to www.yellowllama.com.
What we need soul food. Henry soul food. No, we need it soul food. Henry soul food. No, I like it soul food. Henry soul food. No, we need it soul food. Henry soul food. Hit me.
Home of the sweet potato pie. Even the keenest taste buds will tell you the best food on the planet. Large enough to serve you and small enough to know you. So get to Henry's at 5431 Indian Head Highway, Oxon Hill, Maryland, or give us a call at 301-749-6856.
Soul food. Henry's soul